All right. So I want to talk about academia, particularly the peer-reviewed process. And I think it's like, I know this podcast is all over the place, but you know what? This is my life, and I'm trying to make it as part of my life as possible. And so you get to hear all sorts of interesting things. I think that's actually the fun part of it. So if you don't know me, I am Professor Dave Massac. I even forgot who I was. I'm Professor Dave Massac, an Associate Professor of Innovation Strategy and Entrepreneurship, and I created this whole reciprocity project to give back as much as I possibly can. There's so many people that help me out that I want to pay the favor for it to help you out. So, this whole journey with the whole reciprocity project actually began, I'm a researcher, and I spend an enormous amounts of time writing and reading. It's not just analytical work. I think a lot of people sort of forget that. The vast majority of our work as a scholar is far from analytical work. In fact, if you're at the best institutions, you tend to actually not do a lot of analytical work because you have a team of researchers or a team of statisticians that do this for you. But I'm at a good institution, and we have resources, but we don't have the resources like a lot of places, right? So we have to do a lot of our own analytical work. So I do spend some time doing that, but I spend a great deal of time doing writing, and I've had to train myself. The more writing that you do, the actual better it is. So I wanted to create, but I struggle at it, right? So if you didn't know, I was in special ed until I was about grade 5 or so, and a huge part of that actually had to do with, language and writing. That was a huge part of what I was struggling with, and turns out later on in life I found out I had, ADHD, and so I struggle with that. I'm putting it together. I'm eating an orange. I'm a delicious mandarin orange. I'm a engineer as my undergrad, and I thought wouldn't it be cool if I actually had a tool, or I created a platform that allowed us to do what we needed to do and sort of help us out to do better research. And so I was like, well, wouldn't it be cool if I created this thing? And lo and behold, that's how I started on the whole reciprocity project, right? So I was creating this sort of sharing economy editing platform-ish thing, sharing economies like the ride sharing and, home sharing, all those kind of things. So I was like, well, why can't we do this in the research game? And in fact, there's a lot of stuff that sort of mimics. I would say that a huge part of that actually mimics what goes on in academia. And I think that people actually sort of borrowed that. They were probably thinking about some of those things. And so I was like, well, why can't I do this and allow people to sort of help and participate in different ways, right? So they don't have to be academics to help out. And if I can create the infrastructure that, despite their limitations, despite their, not really getting it, that, the machine would help them out. It's working, but, there's a long ways to go. There's a tremendous amount of infrastructure that needs to be done to sort of get to the point where you just upload something, you have some thoughts, you upload something, comes back and spits out this, like, really cool finished product. I mean, that's the ultimate goal, right? Is it going to get there? I don't know. But that's where I'm working towards, and building in different tools and things that are in it to sort of help me. And I was using it today, and I've been using it a lot more in my writing, and it's actually a useful tool, right? Like, it actually helps me out a lot. So I use sort of basic analytical tools at the beginning, and then once I get it to the point where I have something that's coherent, I send it off to the reviewers that are on the system. But, I digress, right? So I wanted to talk about the review process, journal review process. And it's a pain in the butt. We've got a centralized individual right? So instead of the machine, if you go back to reciprocity, what's happening is the machine is divvying out to different individuals. You kind of can select, who you want to send it to. That's actually something that we built into it in the last 6 months, is you can have greater, you can select who you want to send it to. It's actually been kind of useful, because part of the problem that I was struggling with, and I thought, I thought the machine would be able to sort of handle this, but it was hard to do. So giving some choice in terms of, who it gets sent to. So an editor in the journal review process, and scientific journal review process, gets your submission, as the general sort of way. Or associate editor gets it, sends it off to a couple of reviewers that they think are, you could make recommendations sometimes who those reviewers are, but they send it off into the preferred reviewers. Those reviewers give you feedback, comes back, and you get insight on it. So, there's problems with the review process. Even though it's double-blind, the reviewers themselves are double-blind. So you don't know who the reviewers are. The reviewers don't know who you are. At least I take that pretty seriously. I'm sure you can look it up, but I really try to, maybe after the paper has gone through its steps, I might look it up. But, while it's in the review process, while it's still there, till there's that sort of end decision, there's no way I'm going to look that up. I want to make sure that's double blind. But the challenge with it is, so how to put this? So like things like, softer metrics and stuff actually or softer sort of things play an important part of the review process, and it's not supposed to, but it does, because there is some limitations in terms of, first of all, the editor kind of knows what's going on. People kind of get a sense of, the quality of what's going on, with the quality of idea. There's lots of different things that are going on that give it some squishiness, and it's hard if you're not in, positions of power in academia to get away with some things. So, that's one thing to remember. If you're not in a position of power, reviewers tend to be pretty ruthless with what you are doing and what you do. In fact, they're generally at a good place. They're ruthless in general. And they will throw it out for any other, any slight reason. They'll throw out your research because they just don't like it. And so figuring out, anticipating, trying to understand, it's not just about the results. It's not just about the science, but it's like figuring out what they want and sort of thinking through how can we sort of address these things before you actually get it. Get to the reviewers is a really important part. And so thinking about, there's a lot of actually strategy that's involved, unfortunately, and you're thinking about, okay, it's not just this idea, it's not just this result, but how do we tell the story that this thing is important, that your results actually make sense? There's a lot that goes on. The storytelling component is critical to address a lot of the issues of what goes on in the review process. But you have to remember, reviewers are just ruthless most of the time, and they're going to throw things out for any slight reason. So if they have just a little bit of, if something's off, there's a lack of clarity, they will throw it out. They'll throw out what you're actually working on and never even pay attention to it, because, that and the reason they're ruthless, it's generally, they're annoyed because they have to dedicate some of their own time to, reviewing, that they're, that they feel like they should be doing, this is not part of their duty, all sorts of things, right? And so they tend to be ruthless, and they just tend to throw things out no matter what, right? And it's really typically, if you're a reviewer that's worth your weight, you're ruthless, but also you try to help out, and you say, hey, you should be doing this kind of thing, right? So there's that component of, like just ripping into it, but also like, hey, you got to work on this. So, long story short, a huge part of it is writing and sort of aiming at trying to get the story just right. And you have to really think about what this actually means. But it's a combination of different things where it has to be just right before it sort of hits. And it's a real tricky thing. And I think, I don't know what the right answer is. I think like getting some insight from people in terms of what they think, really start sort of sharing ideas, I think is important. So sharing ideas is a little challenging because sometimes people do steal your ideas. So finding a trusted group where you can sort of bounce things off is important. And just keep working at it and refining and, really just getting that sort of logic down is helpful. So that's what I want to say. Just remember, is reviewers are ruthless with it. So if you're sending it to any journal that is like, that is respected, just assume the reviewers hate what you're doing, and you have to put in a tremendous amount of work to get it to the point where actually somebody is paying attention, and they'll say, hey, you know what, this is not half bad. And then when that happens, they will still say, it's not half bad, but you have to redo everything. Everything that you're doing is probably wrong, and we're going to have to start from the beginning and redo all of this stuff. So remember that when you're doing this. So if you do have some status in science, you're a significant player or whatever in the scientific effort, then you can get away with a little bit. But, here's the sort of conundrum, right? So those people that have significant status that tend to not be as prolific, or not to be as, they tend to have high standards, right? So then everybody knows that they can get away with a little bit. It's like if you often, people that have a tremendous amount of power to do something are the least, powerful because everybody knows that they're not going to abuse that particular power. And knowing that you're an influential player, you often really take things seriously before you actually submit it and do anything with it. So that's all I wanted to say. Just hang tight with it. Know that reviewers are ruthless, and just keep working at it. There's no magic other than just going, revising, rethinking, constantly putting that effort in. You got to be putting in. You got to be writing 5 to 10 pages a day. You just have to be. I do that, and it still is not enough, and because there's still a lot more that you can possibly do. You could see how much I actually looks like how much I publish, and it's just, it's a grinder, and just know that is just part of the process. All right, take care, because reviewers are ruthless. All right, take care, and have a wonderful day.